Imagine this. November 18, 1942. Over the blood-soaked island of Guadalcanal, a Japanese Zero pilot grips his control stick, his heart hammering against his ribs. Below him, something impossible is happening. Strange twin-boomed American fighters are clawing their way up from Henderson Field, climbing with a ferocity that defies gravity. In that moment, everything he knows shatters. Later, back at his base in Rabaul, his voice will tremble as he reports the impossible, twin-engined, twin tails. Climbing like nothing we have seen. The words are laced with a dread that marks the first crack in Japan's belief in its own aerial supremacy. Through his salt-smeared canopy, he witnessed the P-38 Lightning, a machine that Japanese intelligence had dismissed as a clumsy giant. But it wasn't clumsy, it was ascending from sea level to combat altitude with a speed that left his legendary Zero gasping. For months, the Zero had been a god in the skies over the Pacific. From Pearl Harbor to the Philippines, no Allied fighter could match its climb rate or dance its deadly ballet in a dogfight. But here, over this God-forsaken island, American pilots were rewriting the rules. Their engines roaring, a challenge that filled the Japanese pilot with a gnawing terror. That day, the P-38s claimed 3 of his comrades, diving from heights where the Zero's famed agility meant nothing. His confidence, and that of his entire air force, began to evaporate like morning mist. The collapse of Japanese air superiority had been brewing long before that fateful November day. But the thought was heresy. Since December 7, 1941, pilots like the famed ace Saburo Sakai had stormed across the Pacific, their hearts swelling with an unbreakable resolve. The Mitsubishi A6M Zero was their divine chariot. With its incredible range and razor-sharp turning, it seemed invincible. Sakai himself, with 64 claimed kills, flew with the certainty of a god, a feeling shared by his comrades. Before the Guadalcanal campaign, his superior, Lieutenant Junichi Sasai, had told his men the American fighters would be carrier-based Wildcats foes they had humbled before. Early victories against obsolete Allied planes had only fueled their exhilaration. So, when whispers of a new American threat began to circulate in mid-1942, a twin-engine, twin-tail beast, with guns, clustered in its nose, most commanders scoffed. How could such a behemoth challenge their nimble marvel? The P-38 Lightning was that behemoth. Born from a 1937 Army Air Corps request, it was a miracle of engineering. It screamed past 400 miles per hour, soared to 40,000 feet, and had a combat range that seemed like dark magic to Japanese engineers who had sacrificed everything, even armor and self-sealing, fuel tanks, for lightweight maneuverability. The P-38 embodied raw power, speed, and the will to survive. When P-40 veterans, scarred from earlier defeats against the Zero, transitioned to the Lightning, their eyes lit up. They had learned never to turn with a Zero. Now, the P-38 gave them the keys to vengeance. The encounter on November 18th was the Lightning's baptism by fire. The American pilots climbed into the fray, gaining 5,000 feet of altitude advantage before the Zeros could even react. "What are those?" a Japanese pilot must have gasped, watching the strange silhouettes surge upward. Then came the dives, heart-stopping plunges that smashed into their formations. The physics were merciless. Above 250 miles per hour, a Zero's controls stiffened. Pestigaratus, it became a flying brick. But the P-38, with its hydraulic boosts, could dance through dives nearing 500 miles per hour, its pilots whooping with glee, while Japanese pilots felt the cold grip of despair. The shock went deeper than speed. The P-38's nose-mounted Arsenal 450 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon unleashed a straight, deadly stream of fire, with none of the convergence problems of wing-mounted guns. And its turbo superchargers did more than just maintain power at altitudes where the Zero's engine wheezed and struggled. They muffled the engine's exhaust, turning the Lightning into a silent assassin. Often, Japanese pilots heard nothing until bullets tore through their cockpits. Their last moments were filled with wide-eyed terror. By early 1943, squadron reports and private letters home were filled with anguish. Pilots spoke of unending tension, their eyes constantly scanning skies haunted by invisible threats. Saburo Sakai himself would later confess, it was no longer possible to engage the P-38s except under rare conditions that seldom arose. His words rippled through the pilot community like a death knell. the tactical nightmare deepened. The P-38's incredible range meant it could strike anywhere, shattering the illusion of safe havens. Nothing captured this more than Operation Vengeance. On April 18, 1943, 16 P-38s flew a staggering 435 miles, skimming the waves to evade radar, to intercept Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor. The Zero escort pilot, Kenji Yanagaya, watched in horror as the lightnings materialized from nowhere, executing their mission with cold precision. Yamamoto's plane plummeted in flames. Japan's most revered military leader, guarded by 6 of its best fighters, had been hunted like prey. The assassination was a dagger to the Navy's soul. As the war dragged on, American pilots perfected their boom and zoom tactics, diving from above, striking, and using their superior speed to climb away, leaving shattered Zeros in their wake. Behind this tactical dominance was the might of American industry. Over 10,000 P-38s were built, with 18 variants constantly refining perfection. Meanwhile, Japan could only manage incremental tweaks to the Zero. Captain Minoru Genda, another Pearl Harbor planner, confided with a heavy heart, "We are facing a system of endless improvement we can't rival." The quality of pilots also tragically diverged. Japan was bleeding its irreplaceable veterans, and training for new recruits was slashed to just a few months. They arrived at the front with less than 200 hours of flight time, terrified. In contrast, American pilots arrived with 400 to 600 hours, their skills honed in simulators. Even survival favored the Americans. The P-38's twin engines were a form of salvation. Pilots could often limp home on one. A Zero pilot, with a damaged engine, faced a lonely grave in the vast Pacific. By late 1943, Japanese intelligence reports urged pilots to simply avoid the P-38 unless they had a massive advantage. This inversion of the proud warrior ethos bred shame and disillusionment. American aces like Major Richard Bong, with 40 victories, and Thomas Maguire, with 38 all-flying P-38s became legends whose names evoked envy and dread. The P-38 was nicknamed Two Planes, One Pilot, a name that blended confusion, respect, and above all, fear. The shock wounded the very soul of Japanese military culture. The poetic art of samurai combat had met the cold, hard logic of American engineering. Commander Masataka Okumiya wrote with bitter regret, "We mistook spirit for strength." Desperation birthed ramming attacks and ultimately the kamikaze. A tragic admission that conventional air combat was no longer possible. Post-war interviews revealed the raw emotion. Okumiya confessed, "The P-38 broke us utterly." Another pilot recalled his first sight of it. "I was astonished that an American plane could outrun our Supreme Zero." The numbers tell the final story. Over 1,800 Japanese aircraft destroyed by P-38s, at top speed of over 400 miles per hour versus the Zero S-332. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into history, and let me know in the comments what you think. See you next time.